from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison with my co-host, Reverend Terry Webster Sr. And on this episode today, we're going to talk about, has the violence in Indianapolis really gotten any better over the last few years? Or have we just moved the goalposts? Or some would say, have we lowered the goalposts? Stay tuned and join us. Welcome. This is Real Talk with Reverend Terry Webster Sr. and Reverend Charles Harrison, and we would like to welcome you to our podcast. We try to do real talk, and we try to really be honest. We try to be uncensored in our conversation about real issues that impact our community locally here in Indianapolis and across the country. Well, welcome, Pastor Webster.
Thank you, my friend. It's good to be here on Friday. This is always the day that all of us in the working week look to get to. It's Friday because now we're looking at the weekend. Yeah,
that's true. Listen, today we want to talk about a couple things. One is, has the violence in Indianapolis really gotten any better? Or have we just moved the goalposts? And then number two, for Black Americans who tend to be disproportionately impacted by the violence, particularly urban violence, have we become numb to it and have just settled on the fact that this is something that we cannot do much about in this country? So those kind of are the two issues that we kind of want to talk about today and be real honest about it. I certainly have some strong opinions about both things.
Pastor Harrison, thank you. To me, I don't know that we have just simply moved the doorpost because I don't think that I don't think that the violence in Indianapolis is going unnoticed in no one's eyes in terms of political or even clergy or organizations. The violence in Indianapolis is affecting all of us, and it's affecting all of us in a negative way. The violence in not just Indianapolis, but it's in our cities across the country. Is certainly. It's certainly worth noting. But in Indianapolis, to me, just this week alone, we've had some unprecedented violence in areas really that we used to did not see violence in. For example, when you talk about the convention center, violence down there right after the Pacer game, right downtown in the heart and soul of our city. Young man shoots, another young man runs through the convention center. And then at the basketball game over at Howell High School, the violence is pretty much off the hook. And as it relates to how we become numb to it, no, Pastor Harrison, we have not become numb to it, but like anyone else, when I watched the news, listened to the news, what is at the head of and caption at every news is violence. And so I don't know that we've moved the doorposts, but I don't know what the solutions are either, other than when you said welcome to the broadcast with Pastor Harrison and Pastor Webster as the host.
Right.
Now, if I put my ecclesiastical hat on, then I will give you some solutions to the violence.
Okay. You give us some solutions. well, listen, my perspective is this. I think I was somewhat disturbed, and I need to paraphrase that a little bit, by what I thought was the celebration at the beginning of the year that the numbers in 2022 were down from 2021, and we moved from 271 homicides to 229 homicides. And I'm concerned that there was somewhat of a celebration about that. When you look at the last 10 years, and let's just go the last 10 years.
Okay.
And I throw these numbers out, and kind of, for those who are listening, hear kind of my heart and my perspective. In 2012, we go 10 years ago, 2012, because we just ended 2023, Indianapolis ended the year with 109 homicides and 96 murders. That was the last of 4 consecutive years, going back to 2009, that Indianapolis had 4 years in a row where we had under 100 murders. In 2013, we went up from 109 in 2012 to 142 in 2013. In 2014, we ended the year with 153 homicides. In 2015, Indianapolis ended the year with 158 homicides, but we broke the murder record, which was set in 1998 at 143 murders. We ended 2015 with 144 murders, one more murder. In 2016, we broke another homicide record with 171 homicides. In 2017, we broke another homicide record in 178 homicides. In 2018, we broke another record with 179 homicides. In 2019, we went down. We went down to 172 homicides. And again, those in the city celebrated. I got in trouble that year because I said that there were some things going on in the community that was concerning to us. We had a shooting downtown where 6 individuals had been shot in the fall, and I was concerned, along with the president of FOP, that we were not reading the tea leaves right, that there was more going on out there than what was reflected in the year-end numbers. In 2020, we ended the year for the first time in the history of Indianapolis with 245 homicides, the first time in the history of this city that we had exceeded 200 homicides. We broke another homicide record. In 2021, we broke another homicide record with 271 homicides in the city. And then last year, we ended the year with 220, in 2022, with 229 homicides. That was the third year in a row that we had exceeded 229 homicides. And Pastor Webster, my concern is that the goalpost has been moved and are lowered, and the standard has been lowered. Indianapolis, from about 2000 to about 2012, on the averaged about 96 murders a year. That's what we averaged, and that was under several mayors. Mayor Peterson, we're going back to Mayor Goldsmith, Mayor Peterson, Mayor Ballard. In that time frame, we had a pretty good run as a city. It was one of the leading cities in the country. And my concern now is it seems like we have either settled or given up hope that we can ever get the numbers back down to where they were 2012 to 2020. And that's my concern with basically what I am seeing in the city, because the numbers are extremely, extremely high. And you look back at 2012, we are 100 plus more murders in 2022. If you just look at the 2022 numbers, you are 120 more homicides than you had in 2012. And that is a dramatic increase over a 10-year period of time.
It is. Actually, from 142 in 2013 to 229, 271 in 21, and 2022, 229. To be quite honest with you, that's quite disturbing. But again, Pastor Harrison, I'm not sure that any political figure, mayor, governor, anyone, council, I'm not sure that none of us have the answer to this. It's disturbing. Other than the clergy, other than the ecclesiastics, I don't think that we're dealing with just a homicide problem. I think we're dealing with a spiritual problem. Mm-hmm. And dealing with a spiritual problem, we have to bounce it back to where it is, and that is put the onus upon the spiritual emphasis upon this matter. Now I have seen some stats and some statistics to where most of these who are committing the homicides and committing the crimes, a lot of them have already been arrested several times.
Correct.
And let back out.
Right, correct.
So I think that if you see the potential for these kind of things, crimes being committed, and we're letting you out, letting you out for small reasons, I think that we may have to really consider again what do we do with our criminals who have the potential and the records show a potential
right.
of committing such crimes. Because from what I've read and understood, that some of these people have been in trouble with the law more than once already.
Right.
And
right,
then you get out and now you commit a crime that's just homicidal.
Right.
But as it relates to numbers going up, these are very disturbing. And so the questions that I ask is, what can we do?
Well, I think I think those are good questions, and I do agree with you that I believe that the church, and there are going to be people who are not going to agree with this.
Not going to agree with it.
But I certainly believe the church, and particularly the black church, has to play a critical role in addressing this issue, because I too believe that certainly it is spiritual in nature. But I understand some of the social ills that is also driving the violence, in our communities, that often we don't want to really talk about, as to what are some of those factors that are driving the violence. And I think we have to begin to have those conversations. But I do think when you look at...
What are some of the social ills that you think might be perhaps driving some of the violence? Well, not all, but some.
Yeah, I do think people are correct when they talk about the issue of poverty. I do think that's real. I think that's real. I don't think they always get into the causes of it, though. Okay, what's causing the poverty? If I'm 12 years old and I'm in a home where my mother may be struggling to provide for a family of 5 of us, and there's not always a meal on the table for us, or we may only get one a day. Pastor Webster, I could not say here on this radio that I would not have done some bad things in order to survive. And I think when we put young people in that kind of position, it is so easy for us to say what we would have done, not being in that situation where me and my siblings may not have a meal. So am I capable at that point in trying to survive? Am I capable of picking up a gun and robbing someone or doing something criminal in order to put food on the table? And I think those are real. Or if my mother or father are crackheads, and all of the resources are going towards supporting their habit, and they're not concerned about what's going on with their children at home, that's real. It happened with my sister, which is my parents had to basically raise her children because all of her resources were going towards supporting her habit. Those are real conversations I think we need to have. But I do think it pushes sometimes some of our younger people who we have concern about into a life of crime based on need and circumstances.
Okay. Let me do a couple of things. So I heard you talk about the social ills. I think you spot on with that. I think again, I think we try to get away from the equity as it relates to equal opportunity in certain communities. I was watching the news, my wife and I, a couple of nights ago, and legislation now is being put forth on these opioid situations and those who are addicted to them. I think that there is a greater concentration, and we see this, a greater concentration now on the opioid crisis, because oftentimes that doesn't affect us. It's the crack and the marijuana that affects us, even though now it's being laced with fentanyl and everything else.
Right.
So when it comes to equity and cleaning up things in our community, I think that play a major part as it relates to crime. But I also think when we go back to homicide, conflict resolution play a part too, because
certainly.
I think in the home, our homes have to teach our children how to handle conflict.
Yeah, but
I think that's not being done.
But has part of the problem been with particularly Generation X, millennials, Generation Z, Generation now Alpha, the abandonment of the church? And what role did the church play, along with what was happening at home, in shaping the moral compass of young people in the black community? There were things that seemed like to me growing up that we would not do, even though I cannot say I was totally innocent, but there was a line that I would not cross and others in the community would not cross because of the upbringing of the church and the moral compass, and that foundation was being laid, which we don't see today because they have a conflict like what may have happened downtown, at Convention Center, Lucas Oil Stadium, what happened at high school with two teenagers getting into a conflict, and one teenager then shoots the other in the head. I'm trying to grasp and understand that where a simple conflict leads now to someone dead, and that's happening more and more and more in our community, where it used to be what was driving the violence was drugs and robberies. Now it's drugs, robberies, interpersonal conflicts, and domestic violence.
Yeah. So you asked at one time, did the church play a critical role? The church played a critical role, and the church still should play a critical role. But the church is the last thing we want to turn to. In fact, everybody is kicking the church to the curb. So, but there's a familiar passage in Jeremiah 6:16, and it says, God's message yet again, go stand at the crossroad, ask for direction to the old road, the true and tried road. Then when you ask for direction, take it. Discover the right route, for your souls don't want nothing to do with that. Now, that's the Message Bible, but it's telling us we need to go back and ask for the right road. And good, bad, indifference with Gen and Y and Z and all of that. You and I sit here today because we had that old road, that old path that has gotten us to this point, and you were raising Jeremiah and Jalen in that old path. I think some of our conflict resolution and our issues in the street is because they don't want the old path. They don't want the old road. So therefore, Pastor Harrison, government can't help us. It's going to have to be the entity that helped us before. And I know we don't want to hear it. We want to cross it out. But the entity that helped us before is the church. And we got to get back to to the church.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Terry Webster Sr. and Reverend Charles Harrison. And for those who are joining us today, we're really talking about has the violence in Indianapolis gotten any better, or have we moved the goalposts? I am probably different from Reverend Webster on this. I believe the city's moving the goalposts on this issue. And I do believe that what is missing, this is me talking,
Real talk,
is that the city leadership is no longer listening to the prophets on the ground. And I think in years past, how we address crime and violence was based on clergy leaders being at the table, talking with the leadership, political leadership of this city about what should be done. What most people don't understand, the whole crime prevention concept came from black preachers at the Christamore House when Mayor Peterson was mayor, and he asked us to come up with a solution, and we met for months coming up with a solution. That was one of the only times that all the ministerial groups came together, and Bishop Benjamin, Pastor Jeffrey Johnson, Charles Ellis.
I was there.
Yeah, Terry Webster, Charles Harrison. We were all there. We came up, and we gave the idea of putting $5 million a year. It came from us. It didn't come from the council. It didn't come from the Blue Ribbon Task Force. It came from the preachers. $5 million each for each year. $1 million in several different categories: substance abuse, youth jobs, boots on the ground. We laid out the plan, and that was the plan that was put in place from 2009 to 2012, when we have 4 consecutive years of being under 100 murders. I think if we would have kept the plan, we'd have got it under 90. But that's when leadership listened to the prophetic voices in the community.
Well, to be honest with you, Pastor Harrison, that's great historic information. But to be honest with you, to be quite candidly honest with you, we're going to have to get back to that.
Right.
We're going to have to get back to clergy coming to the table, and we're not disrespecting no group of people,
right,
or no clergy people. But I think that our leadership in the city and in the state going to have to. I believe if we're going to get our hands around this violence, because now we're from center of the town to Castleton,
right.
Ain't nowhere in the state of Indiana or the city of Indianapolis exempt from crime.
That's right. That's
and
right.
I think that if
That's
we're
right.
going to get back to getting a handle around this crime, we're going to have to get back to that. We're going to have to get back. We're in a mayoral race,
right,
and it doesn't matter who wins the race. We're going to have to get back to bringing clergy to the table so that we can help with the solution.
That's true. That's true. But do you think, though, Pastor Webster, that there is no accountability that, and we talk about clergy, because really, the black church, and I know people knock it, but we're still
but you can't.
The most important institute in the black community. We are. We touch more people in the course of a week than any other institution in the black community. Absolutely. Hands down. But I'm not for sure that we always represent as clergy our community properly, in the sense that we're not always holding those who are in power accountable to the people. I don't know how many members you have had that have had loved ones killed in the streets, but I imagine you have, along with all of us pastors.
All of us have.
And we have had to bury people. Sometimes these young people who are killed don't have no insurance. And that burden that is on the family, and then it becomes the burden of us leaders in the community to try to help, our parishioners during a very difficult time, and we see the pain. And how many people, they say for every homicide, at least 100 people are touched by it, and sometimes more. And we're feeling that pain as leaders in the community who are trying to deal with this violence that is disproportionately impacting communities of color.
Well, again, I still say that it's a spiritual problem, although we're seeing it manifest itself in the streets. I still say it's a spiritual problem, and which going to call for spiritual solutions, along with social solutions.
Right,
we
right,
can
right.
have a social solution.
Right,
We should
right.
have a social solution, and the social solutions should be equitable.
Right.
And so I still think until we can come back to spiritual solutions, along with social solutions, and not political solutions, we're gonna see the violence escalate.
But don't you think that there should be? I agree with political. I mean, I agree with social and spiritual. I'm a preacher. I agree with that. But I also believe the third component has to be there too, which is political, because they control the resources.
Okay, from that regard, yes.
Yeah,
Regard,
because
yes.
they control the resources, and I don't always think they use the resources properly and target them to reflect the real needs that are on the ground.
Okay, yeah. In that regard, those who do have access and control of resources, I think they should be distributed. Again, there's that word, equitably.
Yeah, yes.
They should be distributed equitably, and it should not be to one social group gets something and the other social group gets nothing, and then we see the intentions of others who control resources and cut some off for the sake of others. And what's at stake is the high crime and violence in the city.
So when you say the spiritual, this is what the spiritual need. How much of the spiritual then addresses the whole issue of family? Because some will argue that the absence of us, particularly black men, in the family has been a major contributor to this 6-decade problem of urban violence.
Well, I mean, not only will some argue that, I argue that, but not only do I argue that, that's a biblical principle.
Right.
That when fathers are turned from the families are cursed. And so there again, if we're dealing with a spiritual, if we're dealing with a solution in the streets, now we have to come back to what does the family look like. And as we talked about last week, a week before last, there are 60-something%, almost 70% of families are being raised now by single-parent moms.
Yes.
So we got a spiritual problem again. We got to get fathers back to where they need to be. Who's doing the most killing, perpetrating in the streets? Yeah,
unfortunately, it tends to be young black males killing young black men. Yes.
And Pastor Harrison, I have a real issue with an outcry, and don't get me wrong, with the outcry of a black police, as we saw in Memphis, and it should be an outcry for that. But I have a real issue with us not having an outcry for this black-on-black crime in the streets when we're killing each other. I have a real issue with that. I think we should be just as outraged about that as we are about injustice by police.
But the question becomes, why are we not? Why are we not outraged about the black-on-black killing? We had a 19-year-old young man killed at Howe High School. Charter schools were using the gymnasium. And a young mother ended up trying to provide aid for the young man, and the young mother told me that she ended up holding that young man in her arms as he died in her arms as he was shot in the head. And she said what startled her, Pastor Webster, is that other kids came out young with guns, ready, and that frightened her, ready to retaliate against who had shot that young man. So what was already a bad situation almost got worse, with children, battling other children with guns.
That's disheartening.
Yeah. It is, and that is the reality of what I think you and me and other leaders across the country are trying to address. And I had a conversation with my mother, and we completely did not agree on this. But when it's your mother, I say, Mom, I just see it differently because. Her concern probably, because I don't think my mother thinks that nothing can be really done about the black-on-black violence. She thinks that something can be done about what police do to us. But I think psychologically, my mother, and I think she represents a lot of people, may not think that much can be done about the black-on-black issue. So is that why we have become numb about it?
No. Well, that's not why I haven't become, because I think that there's hope.
Okay.
I think that there's hope, but again, I think that those in positions and places that have access to the resources, along with those who are from the spiritual faith-based community, I think we got to come to the table and talk and not holler and not talk at each other. And I also think that it starts with clergy. Talking to clergy also. We can't, you and I can't be sitting here in a podcast talking about the issues of black-on-black crime in our community, and then cross town, we got two other people talking about the issues, and we see totally different.
Right.
How do we come together and see it the same way? And what's affecting all of us is the violence that we see night after night, noon after noon, day after day. Is disheartening. Right. How do we come together to help our city?
I think that's a good point. This is Real Talk with Reverend Terry Webster Sr. and Reverend Charles Harrison. And we're talking about today, has the violence in Indianapolis gotten any better, or have we moved the goalposts? And then what has been the response of the black community? Have we become numb to this violence and have not been as demanding and as proactive as we could be when it comes to lowering the violence? Has the church been effective in what it could do, to help, with this spiritual problem, as Pastor Webster talks about, in addressing the spiritual component of it that is leading to this record-breaking violence that we're seeing in the city? I just believe that we can get the numbers back down. I do. I believe we can get them back down to pre-2015 numbers. Reverend Ellis did something years ago that he did it in a press conference, the late Reverend Charles Ellis, when we had a press conference downtown, and he said, we're going to get the numbers under 100. And everybody started looking at one another. Did he really just say that? And after the press conference, we said, Reverend Ellis, why did you say that we were going to get the murder numbers under 100? He said, I believe we can do it. And in 2019, we ended the year with 99 murders.
I believe we can do it too, Pastor Reverend Harrison, Pastor. I believe we can do it even now, but I believe, again, it's going to take the spiritual, the social, and then the powers to be that have access to social programming for our children to come on board with us. I don't think that social programming is the complete solution. Right. But I do think that it helps with those who otherwise would get in trouble doing other things. So I think that we can get it under at least these numbers, 200. Right. Because he was saying get it under 100. Now we got to
get it under 200.
Yeah, we got to get it under 200. So I think that things can be done. But everyone have to stay in their lane and do what they can to help get it done. It cannot be about me, myself, and I.
Right. So do you see that as when we talk about the problem that we have not been able to galvanize like we did? I think it was in 2006 when all of us religious leaders came together, and we put together the crime prevention plan to reduce violence.
Yep.
We all
we gotta
came
do that
together.
now.
Yes, we all came together.
I think we have to do that now. And to be quite honest with you, I'm putting this out here. If I was a candidate for the city mayor's race, if I was a candidate, I would be reaching out to the clergy community, wanting to know how can we come together and get this done. It wouldn't be about a certain group of individuals I'm only working with.
Right.
I would put the clarion call out to all clergy and all clergy groups. How do we come together and put together a plan for the community? Yeah,
because I think you correctly said it earlier in the podcast. You know, in 2010, most of the violence was contained to the urban core. That's what we were saying. Most of the violence.
Absolutely.
You could, Hallville, Unwa, Crown Hill. You keep going further east. 38th and Sherman. 10th and Rural. 42nd and Post Road. I mean, we pretty much knew where the violence was. Now it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere now. No place is safe. Which then says that there's a role that everyone can play.
Absolutely.
That we have churches everywhere in the city. We have grassroots organizations everywhere in the city. We have neighborhood groups. Everyone can play a role in this in their own area, coming together to help try to curb this record-breaking violence. And I say this to the politician because this is real talk. You got to stop playing favorites of the people that you just want to work
Absolutely.
with. And I think that's what's creating the division, because you don't then have a holistic approach to addressing the violence. If you are the mayor, or if you are a city county council representative, you are a state representative, you need everybody.
We need everybody. And if we're making politics come out of violence, that's bad.
Yes.
Because people's lives are at stake.
Right.
And what we should be about is who is helping to affect change.
Right.
And bringing about transformation, not for a dollar or a penny. It's for the good and the wholesomeness of our community,
right.
and for safe communities. And so we can't let this be a political issue.
Right.
Violence should never be a political issue.
Right.
It's a humanitarian issue.
Amen.
That I think all of us need to address.
Yes, we all have to be a part of this, and I believe that we ought to set a goal. I do. I believe we all set a goal. Now, it may take us 2 or 3 years to get to this, but I do think we ought to set a goal, and this ought to be our goal. The first goal obviously has to be, let's get it below 200. That's goal number one. Let's get it below 200. Now, I think the second goal, or the third goal, has to be, let's get it below the 2015 numbers, which was 158 homicides and 144 murders.
Okay.
I think that should be goal number 3. I think we need to set those goals, and all of us need to be held accountable. But I do believe, Pastor Webster, that we all have to be at the table. Whether you like certain groups or not, they represent, a group of people in
Absolutely.
this city that are being impacted by this crime and violence.
Absolutely. It just can't, it shouldn't look like all clergy.
Right.
It should look like those, as you said, who are doing grassroots work. We
Right.
know young guys on the streets that are doing tremendous work.
That's right.
That have
That's
come
right.
out of this lane and are doing tremendous work. All of our voices should be at the table.
That's right.
To be heard.
That's right.
By the powers to be, and then we go and work on what it's going to take to bring this violence down. It pierces my heart to see night after night. Probably as we sitting here talking now with this podcast,
Right.
probably go home at the 6 o'clock news and somebody done killed someone.
Right.
So we have an issue, and we can bring the spiritual side, and we're not going to divorce the spiritual side.
Right.
But we also believe that the social side have to be there, and everybody got to be at the table on the social side.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Terry Webster Sr. and Reverend Charles Harrison, and we're talking about the issue of violence in Indianapolis. Has the violence gotten any better, or have we just moved the goalposts? One of the things that me and you have been talking about, the spiritual side of it, and we have had this private conversation, and I consider you one of the prayer leaders of this city, talking about galvanizing the church community, religious groups from across the city, and begin to pray on this issue. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, we do, because that is a solution. We might call it cheesy or whatever we want to call it, but we move the heart of God when we come together and pray. And so one of the things we want to do is call out a entire community of us to come together and just pray. And not just only pray, but praise.
Right.
So our desire will be to have praise groups come join us, bring the church outside of the church,
right.
and then clergy hit our knees and simply praying and reading scripture regarding the violence, beseeching God to do something about the violence, and He'll do it as we move His heart. And so we pray that you'll stay tuned to that, because we're planning to get there. And we want police on board. We want community on board.
Yeah, that's it. And for those of you who are going to say, well, prayer, is not going to do anything alone. No, we never said that. We're still doing all the other things. But we believe that going before Almighty God and praying on this issue, that God can move the hearts, because I believe, I've been doing 10-point for 23 years. I believe this is a heart issue. I do. People ask, how does 10-point... how are you so successful in some of the areas you work in? Because we're trying to touch the heart.
It's a heart issue.
It's a heart issue. It's a heart issue. So if you can touch hearts, and the hearts of those who may be potential suspects or perpetrators of violence and victims, then you can move them to address interpersonal conflicts in a different way.
One thing, Pastor Harrison, you know and I know both, even these young guys with guns in the streets, you walk up on them 14 or 15 years old, and if you walk up on them in a respectful way, because they know you, they know who you are, they see you in the streets, they see 10-point in the streets, they see me in the streets, you don't know how that is deflecting.
That's right.
Crime.
That's right. This has been a great conversation, and for those who are joining in, Pastor Terry Webster Sr. and Charles Harrison, we do this podcast every week. We want to deal with the real issues that are facing our community, have real conversation about it. If you would like to join us and talk about a particular issue, certainly on Facebook Live, on my page and Pastor Webster's page, let us know, because we want to have real conversation. We know other people have different ideas and points of view, and we want to say that we don't believe the black community is a monolithic community. We believe that there are different viewpoints, and perspectives on these issues. What we do say is that we all have to find common ground where there is difference, because all of us have the same concerns about what is impacting our community. Thank you so much for joining us today on Real Talk with Reverend Terry Webster Sr. and Reverend Charles Harrison. Please join us again next week as we come back with more Real Talk about real issues that affect our community here in Indianapolis and across the country. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network, and also share it on your own Facebook page or Twitter page. This is Reverend Terry Webster Sr. and Reverend Charles Harrison. We pray that you have a blessed and an awesome day.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.